Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Songwriters on Process podcast. My name is Benno Papari, and since 2010, I have interviewed hundreds upon hundreds of songwriters about the writing process. I have a PhD in English language and literature, and I'm a writer myself. So I've always been interested in treating songwriters the same way that we treat poets and traditional prose writers, as writers, plain and simple. There is no talk of how bands get their name, favorite tour stories, favorite foods, band drama, or anything else. This is an intelligent conversation about the writing process between two writers as we go deep, deep, deep into the writing process. That's it, nothing else. And with that, let's get into today's episode. And today on the pod, it is the Swell season. The Swell season is Glenn Hansard and Markéta Irglová. Their new album is called Forward, and they won an Academy Award, actually, in 2007 for Best Original Song for Falling Slowly. So I don't really care what kind of music you play. If you're a songwriter, this is mandatory listening. I feel like I could pull almost any quote out of this interview and this conversation, and it's almost just a clinic in songwriting. We talked, of course, about their process together, their process separately. We talked about the role of walking. And in the process, I love the fact that when I quote Agatha Christie, and I always use this Agatha Christie quote in these interviews, and Agatha Christie, the author, said the best time to write a book is when you're doing the dishes. And Glenn actually said that he writes songs while he does the dishes. There you go. There was so much about this. He said he can write a song anywhere where he's waiting for a bus. He's written a song waiting for a bus. He wrote For Mercy, waiting at the baggage claim at the airport in New Zealand. I love that Markéta said that she notices that her writing is different depending on where she's writing, that she can write in a busy place and she needs that serenity. And then we got into how important that is. There's so much value in this if you're a songwriter or a fan of the band or not, or as them as songwriters. So I hope you enjoy this. This is really one of my all-time faves. Again, this is Glenn Hansard and Markéta Irglová of the Swell season. I always start with a pretty simple question, and I think I'll ask each of you individually. Markéta, we'll start with you. How important is it to create in some fashion every day? I think writers take two tracks. There are those who feel that you've got to create every day in some fashion, no matter how bad it is. Others say don't push it because things can become derivative, and if you force it, things may become stale. So where do you fall in that category?
I certainly don't push myself to write every day. I feel like there's a type of a kind of a current to it, that I can kind of sometimes I pick up on. There's an idea, there's a melody they'll be playing in my head, and I will sort of feel this kind of this is almost like a longing to come and sit at the piano and see if there's anything to that. So it's almost like something sort of calling me and the piano has become my station. That's kind of where this is kind of dedicated space to sort of ideas being born, or it has become. So once and it has become that way because at some point I was able to do it anywhere, in the living room or like wherever kind of the idea came. But as the house got busier with just life and kids, I kind of needed to make an office for myself in a way, and the piano became my office. And so it seems like me and the piano almost have this kind of relationship where we kind of know, okay, if I sit at the instrument knows, and I know that we have this kind of communication. Okay, we're here, like it's time to work. And sometimes nothing happens. I might sit at the piano for a little bit, enjoy kind of playing around with something, and then just go make dinner, and then just maybe revisit the idea. So I don't feel necessarily completely in control of it. I try to make space for it. I turn up, I have like work hours depending on school hours. And so I turn up, but sometimes the office hours end up being me working on, artwork, or me just kind of hoovering the studio because it's just time to do that. It's very kind of varied. But when I feel called to work on an idea, it'll be a feeling, and then I feel like it's just an energy I have to tap into. And once I grab the idea, like the initial kind of seed, then I can go off and I can go for a walk and think about the lyrics, and I can kind of keep thinking about the lyrics when I'm falling asleep or even watching TV with my kids. It will just kind of ruminate after that. So I think for me the essential point is kind of downloading the initial kind of seed of an idea, I think. And that tends to usually happen at the piano for me, but not always at the same time and absolutely not religiously sort of every day, not no way.
So, a quick follow-up then, are you okay then if that's not happening for a few days? Are you okay with that, or do you get anxious feeling like, "Okay, it hasn't happened for a few days, what's going on here?"
I'm totally okay with that because I also recognize that I kind of need to charge up before I can kind of give something of myself. So like the charging up process will often be sort of reading books or watching like certain stories and kind of just feeling inspired, you know, or just kind of experiencing something in life. And then that will give me something new, some new impulse for new creation. So I think it would be unrealistic to think that you can always be productive in that way, you know. At least for me, that's not how it's ever worked, and I have complete trust, and I sort of perceive that as a huge benefit to myself that I've been very lucky that I've always trusted the process. So I don't tend to ever get anxious about it. I just trust, and the trust takes up the room that the anxiety would otherwise.
I love it. Glenn, how about you?
I have absolutely no worries about if I don't write anything for months. Doesn't
Really?
bother doesn't bother me at all. I'm 24/7 available to the idea. I don't think about it. I don't call upon it. I get that same thing Mar just described, the kind of a longing to pick up my guitar. It's just a kind of a ah, and I pick it up and I just noodle. I never rehearse. I never play songs. I never play songs I never rehearse for a show. I never play my own music at all. I only play new music whenever I pick up my guitar at home. And like I'll record something on my phone, and if it's something that sort of stays with me and kind of begins to kind of become a little earworm for me, like Marquetta said, that earworm may turn into like a half of a line that kind of, and if the line says something about my life, if it has a little energy of truth, then it has the best chance of taking seed in my head and becoming, a few more lines, which will then become a song. And there's no greater feeling in the world than writing a song. I mean, it's like the most exciting. I feel like I feel like a fucking king when I have a song in the brew, in the making, that's already, I know it has to be, I know it will be finished. That is the greatest feeling in the world, but I never push for it and I don't show up for it. And I don't show up at the office every day and I just pick up an instrument when I feel like it, and it either comes or it doesn't. I've always trusted that. I know that there's possibly look, I know that the best chance for a song to be written is if there's a guitar in my hand, or if I'm at a piano. So I try to be at a piano or have a guitar in my hand as regularly as possible. But there's absolutely no agenda in terms of getting anything done. No.
That is about as resolute, an affirmation as I've ever heard. I mean, not even no question in both of those responses, and I love that. Glenn, do you do any type of writing, any journal writing, anything like that ever?
I do journal. I do journal like, in the evening I might just write down, but it's literally a few lines. Like I don't know whether it's a hangover from school, but I don't enjoy writing. Like I love writing a song. I love writing lyrics out. I do that all day. But I don't enjoy actually picking up a pen and writing on a page, even though that's how I write songs. I never write on a computer. I don't, like, sometimes I'll type something into my phone only if I don't have a pen on me, but I generally speaking, I do journal. uh, my process changed greatly when I met my wife because my wife's a poet,
Right.
and she's into alliteration. She's into half rhyme. She, She's into the etymology of words. So as a songwriter, everything changed when I met her because she could listen to much the way Mara would listen to a song of mine and go, that line there is just a bit. Is there something better? She wouldn't like say it's shit. She'd just be like, maybe there's a kind of a maybe there's a better way of saying that. So and that has made me a better writer because it just gives me another layer of somebody I trust saying, just go deeper. I think you're a better artist than this. Go a little deeper there, just there. Just find something.
So having a wife as a poet, I mean, the differences, there's obviously differences between lyrics and poetry. So do you ever get that tension of, well, wait a minute, there's music behind this. I don't have the flexibility to use the figurative language that you can use as a poet where there's no music. So I'd love to know the answer to that. If there's any tension there ever.
Yeah, absolutely there is. And like Myra might say to me, well, I was just thinking about that line because I was doing the dishes or I was just thinking about that line you wrote. What if you said something like this? And I'd listen to what she said and be like, well, I can't say any of that because there are all these structures that this is breaking, you know, because with songwriting, it has to rhyme. It doesn't have to rhyme, but it has to kind of rhyme. You've got these parameters that you're kind of stuck with, which I'm used to. Um, and so sometimes she'll write an amazing line, but I can't use it, you know. And then sometimes she'll write a line off, she'll say something off the top of her head in a text message or something, and I'll be like, "Oh Jesus, can I use that? You've just nailed it. Whatever that, I'm going to build my whole song around that one line." You know, she wrote a a text to me once early on, just after we met, and in her text she said, "I was all boogie boogie till you came along," and I just went, "Oh shit, that's the line," and I remember writing a song around it. You know,
So you actually said something amazing that I've got this quote up here by Agatha Christie. And because you actually mentioned doing the dishes, and Marquetta will start with you. But Agatha Christie once said the best time to write a book is when you're doing the dishes. And I take that to mean that the idea of when our brains are engaged in a monotonous activity, that's when the ideas bubble up. There was an article in the Washington Post last year about why we get our best ideas in the shower. And so it's kind of that same principle. And David Byrne once famously said, I've got a quote from him. He said, "A car is a good place to write lyrics. Driving occupies one part of the brain, freeing up the other." So when people tell me they get ideas when they are hoovering, cleaning, vacuuming, doing the dishes, gardening, chopping vegetables. I had Kebmo, the guitarist, say to me once he gets ideas when he's folding laundry. So I'd love to explore. Marquetta, we'll start with you. How often does that happen? Those ideas bubble up when you're really not thinking about them. We have those eureka moments.
They happen more often now than they used to. It used to be the case that I mostly got my ideas, besides sitting at the piano, lyrically, I would get most of my ideas on a walk. I'd go for a walk, uh, preferably in nature. When I was living in New York City, would just, a park would have to do. But just the motion of, just kind of moving and walking through the town or the park or by a river, it kind of freed up my mind to think about all sorts of things, and I would kind of, finish a lot of lyrics that I've been working on that way. But I've only noticed it in the past kind of maybe a year or two. Basically, since we've been working on this Swell season record, I noticed it a lot more. One of the songs on the record came to me um, uh, in a dream, and then kind of a stroke shower, while another song that actually didn't make the record came to me, and I was picking the kids up from school, so that has started. I noticed it because it was an unusual thing, like that I would just kind of get a random idea in the car, and then I just get to the piano straight after parking and just kind of try and make it into something. So yeah, that makes sense to me,
yeah.
that's a thing for people.
For me, it's definitely the dishes. I mean, I do the dishes every day. That's my job in the house. I do it twice a day. And I noticed that what I'm tempted to do is listen to a podcast while I do the dishes. But what's actually most creative is if I just do the dishes. But I recently made a record down in Italy and drove from Dublin to Italy and hooked up a whole. I remember going to the hardware store and getting these screws that would go into the dashboard of the car. So I screwed in my notepad, and so I drove for 3 days with my notepad on the dashboard, writing the whole time I was driving, and wrote pretty much all the lyrics for my album. I mean, there was some of them were there, but tidied up, finesse. And so I had pages and pages of lyrics while I was on the highway. So it's a little dangerous. But that was when I was doing the writing.
And I want to explore that further because I get ideas too when I'm driving, but it needs to be a familiar place because I find that it's almost like hypnosis when
Yeah.
if I'm driving the kids to school, I've done that drive a million times, my mind can wander. But if I'm driving in a place where I need to pay attention, and I think that also goes with walking too, that in New York City, you're practically not trying to be hit by a bus. But if you're in Central Park, your mind can wander. So, do you ever notice that that makes a difference? It does to me, absolutely. I mean, I find I love to go hiking, and I find that nothing is more contemplative to me than a hike, but it needs to be a hike where I'm not watching out for snakes.
Yes, 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 yes.
So do you ever find, I guess, yeah. So does that, have you ever thought about the difference there? Do you think that makes a difference? Because Glenn, certainly for you, it sounds like you were driving in unfamiliar territory, but those ideas were still flooding in, right?
Yeah, but to also bear in mind, I'm driving on a highway, so it's usually just a long straight, and I'm in the slow lane. I'm not taking over. I'm not trying to take people over while writing a lyric. No, I'll just get in the slow lane, go the speed limit, and write my lyric. I don't. I'm not trying to do all those things at once. So it is like, but I did find that incredibly. I did find that incredibly creative because, like you said, my hands were busy. My mind was the sort of is it the frontal lobe or the back lobe? I'm not sure which one is the one that's dealing with the daily tasks, but I was simply that part of my head is busy, so I'm able to just write. And like when we made this record together, the most creative moment for me was on one of the sessions. I was staying in an Airbnb because Marketta's parents were staying at the house, so I wasn't staying at the house. And I was walking about a 15-minute walk every morning to the studio, and it was golden. I look forward to that walk every morning. And in Iceland, the sun is only coming up around 9:30. So I was walking, it was like January, February. I was walking from the Airbnb, the kind of 10, 15-minute walk up to Marketta's place. And that was when I got all my lyrics. I remember it so well.
You got them while you were walking.
Yeah.
Do you get in, but Marquette, I'll ask you this, and then Glenn, do you get inspired? It's not, is it the walking or the movement itself, or is it the things you're seeing around you that may also inspire you?
Personally speaking, I think you can write a song while waiting for a bus. I don't think it has anything to do with the surrounding. It's got like because it's just in your head. I like you often hear about people going to spend time in at the top of a mountain or in some gorgeous area to be inspired. I've gone and spent time in Connemara in a little cottage on the edge of the sea and written nothing because I've gone there to write. And it's almost like I've put that pressure on myself. The writing happens in the most banal, for me, the most banal moments. Like I remember writing a song of mine called "For Mercy," which is one of my more popular songs at a baggage claim in New Zealand. Waiting for my guitar to come true. So it's just the way the way places songs get written, or the memory of where they get written or how they get written can be can be quite different. You know, I don't think it matters where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Marquetta, how about you?
I think I do tend to need to be not necessarily in nature, but I need to feel like there's nature around me. I don't. I noticed when I lived in Manhattan for 6 months that there was a very little sort of peace, of mind in myself. Like I had a beautiful apartment and on like one of the quieter streets, but it's just like the energy of the city, kind of constant movement. It infiltrated my own personal space, mentally and kind of emotionally. I noticed that like it was an impossibility to sit down and read a book in my apartment. I just couldn't. Like all I wanted to do was kind of go out and walk. Join the kind of hustle of the town, I suppose. And it wasn't until, and during that time, I didn't write anything. It wasn't until I kind of moved to Brooklyn to my friend's brownstone that was in Park Slope. And if I felt like, okay, here I can sort of let my mind go a bit quiet, and I ended up reading lots of books, and they ended up inspiring me a lot. And then I would go to the park and write the lyrics. So I do think for myself, like, even if it's just the park, I need something like, what is the trees, or just an open horizon, or something that kind of lets my mind go to a different place. Even though if I was pushed against the wall, I think I would be able to write something, but it just might be different, than the kind of music that I like to try and write. Um,
Mhm.
I think especially like I've noticed my songs becoming different since I moved to Iceland, for example. There my piano is beside a giant window with the view of mountains and sea. And I think I'd be lying if I said that didn't influence me at all or didn't help me in my creating. I think so. I think it helps me immensely.
Well, if David Byrne's book is anything to go by, the How Music Works book, which is such a great read, and he talks about how music is created for the size room you're playing in. Like, so the classic example being CBGBs, and the punk bands made music to suit the sonic shape of that room. So it was fast and immediate and close, small space music versus stadium rock music or big concert hall music or big what it, I like this idea that we are shaped by the environment we live in. Um, I think it's great. Marketa lives in this. I mean, Marketa's piano is by this beautiful window, and it definitely does create this kind of big, open, spacious mindset. But I also, like, because I make different kinds of music. I make folk music. I'll make rock music. I'm not afraid of making it in a basement or making it in a big, beautiful room. It doesn't really bother me. But maybe each place has an effect on
Mm.
the sound you're making.
Yeah, now it makes me think, could you write a punk album at a piano in Iceland overlooking a wonderful environment? I actually just thought about that. Wow. That would be quite, I'd love to hear that music. Um,
But when you think about Sigur Rós and you think about like Johan Johansson or the music with a Bjork, the music coming out of Iceland has a particular energy, and places have a frequency. And if you've been to Iceland, it's got a particular frequency. It's everything's a little bit kind of high and kind of in the air, and it does have an ethereal energy. Uh, Irish music has a particular energy. Irish traditional music, Irish rock music, and it does. I think the place does influence the sound.
well, also, I took several Irish literature classes when I was getting my PhD, and I mean, you talk about Irish literature and the impact that the sea has. I took a couple. My PhD is in 20th century American theater, so dramatic literature. But I took a
Mhm.
couple of contemporary Irish um, uh, play classes, dramatic literature classes, and the impact that the sea has on Irish literature. Also, of course, it goes
Yeah,
without saying that Impact, I mean, you can't ignore it.
yeah. I don't know who it was, but someone said that a lot of great music. Now, this is back in the early '90s, maybe, but like it's no mistake that a lot of the great music, or a lot of the great bands, come from cold coastal towns. you know, and I think they were referring to like Nirvana being from Seattle or AC/DC being from Melbourne or U2 being from Dublin or, like New York, like the Velvet Underground being from New York. It's just an interesting idea that Beatles being from Liverpool, cold coastal towns, where stuff comes in, where shipments come in, American soldiers come in with their record collection. that influenced the song, like the young British songwriters at the time, and just places, ports where information is being. Nowadays we have the internet, so it's coming at you from every angle. But in the old days, ports, port towns were the places where information was coming in, or cultures were mingling. Just you know, somewhere like Napoli, like the influence of these places. It's a fascinating idea.
Absolutely. So, Glenn, you and I are the same age, and so I grew up with pen and paper. And one of the things I love to discuss with songwriters is when you're writing lyrics, are you a pen and paper person or a computer person? Now, I had Jerry Harrison of the Talking Heads on a couple months ago, and he said it has to be a felt tip pen because he loves the sensation of the scraping on the page.
Right.
But songwriters are incredibly particular about even color of ink. So let's start there first. And you're going to find something so I can tell that this is an important topic. So, uh, yeah. So, what are you bringing me? Hold on.
I use this notebook. This notebook is a it has a steel rim. I've bought like 20 of them, and I've filled about 10 of them. I reckon the other 10, it'll get to the end of my songwriting life. But each one is very particular. It's got very nice paper. I love the paper. It's and then I like a bunch of years ago. Now I'm being a real snob here. I bought myself one time. I was like, what is the deal with Mont Blanc pens? Like what makes them so bloody fancy? And I had some money and I bought myself one. And I was like, ah yeah, I get it. So I'm a total snob. I'm using this fancy pen. I've had it for 15 years. I love the thing. It's just sentimental. Like it's in the same way that you get plectrum and you try to keep that plectrum for a whole tour because that's the one that has the mojo and the spirit. I bought this pen for myself about 17 years ago, and I still have it. And I love these notebooks. I think they're called Bilder, Bilde, or the German. But they're just like it's just. I remember I bought one of these for Patti Smith, and she got in touch with me later on, going, "Where did you get that notebook? I loved it. I want to get another one." And I directed her to the shop where you can get them. And so it is a thing. People have a very particular. They do have a very particular thing, and I love filling this book up. Hey, I go through about one every year, so it's not a huge amount. But between journaling and I tend not to write set lists in it because I don't want to tear any pages out. But I'll I'll use it only for lyric writing and for journaling.
So, Marquetta, how about you?
Um, I like. I used to be more kind of disorganized, I think, about lyrics. Like a lot of the time I would just write them into like books that I was reading at the time. It would give me an idea and I just kind of write a piece of lyric at the back of it, or if I got an idea, sometimes I just wrote it on a napkin or whatever I could sort of grab. I got more organized about just sort of keeping notebooks, a few years back when I started writing whole lot more. Um, so now there's a particular make of notebooks that I like to get just because I like the size. They usually have a nice pattern. I can't remember what they're called though. You can kind of get them in any bookstore. Uh, it's paper and something I think. Sorry, I can't remember the name of it. But about the pens, I like to use ones that have archival ink because I've noticed sometimes something will spill in my bag and the notebook will get wet, and I noticed the archival ink doesn't leak.
Wait, what
When
is
it gets wet.
archival ink?
I guess it's just archival pen where the ink is a little more sort of water resistant, that even if a page gets wet, it doesn't, like, the ink doesn't bleed, so you will still have what you've written.
Mm.
Um, and I think it's supposed to kind of last longer without kind of getting pale and stuff. So that's if I can get it, but I find that I just keep losing every pen that I get. Especially maybe because we have a studio, people would just sort of grab it to use it themselves and then won't return it.
So here is my fear as a writer, and I have rituals too. So, for example, one of my rituals is I never write and revise in the same place. So if I write in this chair, I revise in that chair behind me.
Oh
Um,
wow.
but the problem, because I think about revision, I need distance, temporal and spatial distance when I revise prose. But my fear as a writer is that if I make the process too precious, then I can't do it in other spaces. And so Glenn, do you ever think about that? Because the flip side to that is that because I have songwriters who tell me they write on the backs of utility bills and they'll write on the back of napkins, because if they can do it anywhere, and I'm the same way you are, but that's always my anxiety, is if I make it too precious and too ritualistic, then that prevents me from doing it in other places.
No, I don't care what I write on. I mean, if I don't have my notebook, I'll write on anything.
Okay.
I'm not precious about it at all. I like having my notebook, and it's usually everywhere I am, But if no, if I don't have it, I'll write on my phone. I'll write on a bill. I'll write on a beer mat. It doesn't matter.
So do you go back to those? You sounds like you have a lot of those notebooks. How often do you go back to them and mine them for ideas?
Do you know what's funny? Actually, recently, about 3 or 4 months ago, I burned 40 years of lyrics. I just decided, I don't need them. I had loads of notebooks, and I've been because we're slowly beginning to move out of our house, and I realized I've got and I decided I go in through all of my packs of photos, those packs you get from the old photo labs, and I decided I'm keeping 2 photographs from every pack. So I went through the pack real quick, keeping that one, but keeping that one. Rest, burned, 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 burned. I burned lyrics and photographs for about 3 days straight, like huge bags of them into bins, into bins. And I have to say, and I thought to myself, I kept all my notebooks because these are from the last kind of 10 years. I kept any lyrics that were associated with ones that I could find, because that was such a special time in my life. Everything previous to that, I thought, if there's a good line in this notebook, it's in a song. So I don't give a shit. I'm not keeping it. It can go. And so man, I'll tell you how freeing it was.
Really?
How freeing, and how I just felt so clean. And there's nothing, and there's old frames posters and old Swell season posters and tickets and reviews. Because my mother kept all that shit. My mother kept all the reviews of my band. And originally, because my mom passed away a few years ago, I had to sort of say to her, "Look, mom, in her, I had to sort of say a prayer and say to her, look, I'm burning this stuff. It doesn't mean anything to me anymore. I can't keep it." So I burnt all that stuff, and then I thought, well, while I'm at it, I start going through my old, because I have suitcases full of shit, like old laminates and and anything that had a real particular memory, I'd keep. So I managed to get like 6 suitcases full of my stuff down to 1 suitcase, and I burned 4, and I'm really glad for it.
Okay, so my quick follow-up to that is, in those notebooks, if you wa if you when you take those pens and you have something you don't wanna you don't need anymore, or that are you crossing out, or are you furiously scribbling? Because again, I think if you cross, like, let's say that word you don't like, is it a gentle cross out so you can see it again, or are you furiously scribbling over it so that you don't wanna see it at all?
No, I just cross it out.
Oh. I was expecting a much more in-depth answer than that, especially because I would think that that you'd be furiously scribbling, because it's back with the burning. It's like, I don't even want it, because I'm a furious scribbler. I don't want to see that thing at all. Um, I'm not a gentle line person. I'm a furious scribbler.
No, if I look at my lyrics, like if I look at any page in this book of any song that I was just trying to coming up with, the lyrics are shit. But I allow myself to be shit. I don't care. It's a placeholder. I'm just doing it. I'm getting a shape on it, you know? Um, so I don't worry about, like, what matters is the song. That's
Mhm,
all that matters. So, like, one of the big things for me was, one of the great breakthroughs for me was because I left school early. I'm not an academic, as in, like, I have an academic mind, but I didn't learn academic process. So for me, whenever I picked up a pen, I had this awful association with school. So I never liked it because I always wanted to be great. When I picked up a pen, I wanted to look like a poet. I wanted to sound like a poet. Whereas it's taken me a long time, but now I'm at a point where anything I write in this book is rubbish. It's not important. There might be the odd good line. There might be something that's worth harvesting, but I'll go through, like, if it's a song I like, there'll be 10 versions of it until I get to the version that I like. And I don't cross out anything that was bad. I just don't bother. I have no time. I just don't bother with it. New page. What I'll do is I'll write the song title on the top of the page and I'll write the lyric. And then that most of that lyric is shit. So open the next page, I write the song title name at the top, and I harvest what was good about the page before, and then I start again. And then I write the same song title. So if you look at my notebook, you'll see, a song like Great Way. There's like 20 pages that say Great Ways until the last page is the version that you're hearing, you know?
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's a good segue into the question I was going to ask next. Marketa, we'll start with you. I interviewed the writer Anthony Doerr about 10 years ago, and he wrote a great book that won the Pulitzer Prize called All the Light We Cannot See. And I asked him about writer's block, and he goes, I don't believe in writer's block. He said it's a failure of courage. And I think that's what we're talking about, that nothing is so precious that you can't write it down. But he doesn't believe in writer's block, he said. And I think the thing is, you've got to be afraid to write the shit first. You've got to be afraid to write the bad stuff. And writer's block means that you're afraid to write something down. So, Marquette, I'd like to get your take on that idea.
Yeah, I think, anytime we kind of let those things stop us, like whether it's anxiety or fear, fear of kind of disapproval or fear of judgment, whether that's disapproval from ourselves and judgment or from others, it's always going to be in the way and um, block whatever could otherwise be flowing freely. I think so. That's why I feel like just having sort of trust and surrender as much as possible in the process is so valuable because you're removing all those obstacles. And so then whatever can come through does, and then you can kind of review it and see if it's something that resonates, something that you can connect to on a deeper level, deep enough that you kind of want to work on and see what it can become, because you never know in the beginning what it wants to become or what it can become. So it's a journey one way or another. I'm kind of willing to always take it and see where it wants to take me. And you might find at the end that it's not something you're going to pursue, but you gave it a shot. And I think that's what matters, just kind of seeing what's there. It's kind of like an onion. You're peeling off the layers to kind of see what's at the center. And sometimes, the like the death of one thing is the birth of another. So an idea that might be a failed attempt to create something might actually be what is needed for the birth of the next one.
Good
I
idea.
love that.
Yeah.
So, Glenn, I'm guessing writer's block is not even an issue for you because you're just writing things down all the time.
Yeah, I'm writing things down all the time, and I really agree with Mara's idea that sometimes you get a little bit of an inkling of something, and that you start writing it, you start following it, and that actually leads you to this other thing, which then leads you to this other thing. So everything is leading to something, and the songs that aren't finished aren't failures. They're just you just didn't finish them, and if they hover in your mind, because there's a song on this record. There was a song. Sorry, it's now no longer on the record, called Golden. Um, which I remember coming up with in about 2001. And it was just like, it was a thing. It was like this little thing, but it always stayed with me. Never got finished. It was just a thing. We are golden. I said, like, we are good. Like, we're good. We're good. Everything's good between us. And that's all I really had. Laugh, I'll tell you why. Because soon you're going to fly. And the weight that held you down will disappear with the ground because we are golden. We are golden. That's just a simple little thing. And it went away for years and years and years. I forgot about it. I've lost the lyric. I don't remember. And then one day you pick up a guitar and that little thing just pops straight back in. And if you remain open, like I don't like, if you're not writing anything at the moment, that's fine. Then if you're not writing anything at the moment, go back and finish something old. Because it's just about using. It's just about like what I love is I love when the idea just sort of goes bleh. You know those beautiful moments when you press record on your phone or on your old tape recorder, whatever it was you're using, and a song kind of comes out semi-formed. It's usually semi-formed. It's rarely completely formed unless you're Mar, because you know the "I Leave Everything to You" song. Literally, she went upstairs, she came downstairs, she played us a song, and I was like moved to tears and going, "Now we have a centerpiece for the album." But don't tell me you just went upstairs with nothing and came down with that, because that's you know that's embarrassing for everyone. But it was true. You know, Mark comes from that old school Led Zeppelin universe of like go into the studio with nothing, or the Rolling Stones thing. You know, go to Muscle Shoals, go in, play a bunch of shit, and come out with like one of the greatest records. It's just she has that thing where I don't have that. I'm a process, but I love process. I love, you know, I'll come back to that. You know, keep a pot on the boil, keep another pot on the boil. I stir that one. I put a bit of stuff in this one. This one spoils. Never mind. That'll come back to me in 10 years. Keep working on this one. Oh, that one's gone too. Never mind, because that actually gets me to this idea. You know, like I don't. I'm okay with that. I don't mind losing a patient. You know, whereas Mara's able to just go in and go, you know, play me that idea again, and I play it to her, and she's like, but what if it just went here? And then she's like, look, we better record this because the kids are coming home at 1:30. So go write that lyric, and I'm like, what do you mean? Like, just go write the lyric now. You've got it. I'll make you a cup of tea. Sit down, write that lyric. Let's record this because the kids are getting home at 1:30. And I do it, and I'm like, wow, I was just headlocked into writing a song, you know, and that's actually really good for me, you know.
Well, I was going to say I have found that a lot of songwriters tell me this too, and we're certainly I'm the same way that having kids made me much more productive because now our kids are older, but you know if the kid's going down for a nap, I've got an hour to write, um, and then I'm done for the next 12 hours. So
Yeah,
it's funny because I will create false deadlines for myself. So for example, if my wife and I are going out at 6, I'll start writing at 5 and I'll get more done in that hour than if I sat here and said, "Oh, start the stopwatch. What can I get done?" So I've learned to modify that and artificially create those deadlines so that
yeah.
I get more done that way.
Well,
And that's interesting. What was the old saying? If you want to make a record, um, have no money and book the launch party. They're, they're, they're the first two things you do.
Absolutely. All right, I have a couple more questions. I've got a great quote by William Burroughs up here on my screen, and I'd love to get your take on this. William Burroughs said, "There's only one thing a writer can write about, what is in front of his senses at the moment of writing." So I'd like to discuss the idea of distance. That do you need distance? And Hemingway, although Hemingway always said he could never write about Paris when he was in Paris, he needed
Mm,
that distance. So there's two schools of thought.
mm.
There's the immediacy, and there's that you need distance from something, either metaphorically, emotionally, physically. So Marquetta, we'll start with you. How important do you need distance to be able to write about something?
I don't think so. No, I don't think I do. Um, and I've never really given it much thought. And it's interesting to hear those quotes because it surprises me, you know, it surprises me that someone would kind of define their creativity that way or their possibility to be creative. It's interesting, and I totally respect that that's somebody's experience, but it's not mine. I tend to have to write about things that are relevant to me. I think that would be the key word for me, you know, whether that's just something that I'm thinking about or feeling or experiencing or remembering or wishing for and imagining, you know, it's always something that is that is something that um is either important to me at the time or I'm kind of processing or dealing with or simply allowing myself to envision, you know? Sometimes I allow myself to dream in my songs and just kind of ponder about better ways of being or situations that I kind of like to imagine, uh, what they would look like or feel like. Um, and sometimes I will just write something I have no idea what it even is. Like, I remember writing a song pretty recently, called Mona Lisa, And I was really surprised by that. A song came, and it was and the opening line was, "No one really knows why Mona Lisa is smiling in her portrait" by Leonardo. And just something about, suddenly I was imagining the room in which it was painted, and the kind of sound of Florence, and who she was, and like her role in society, and kind of what it felt like to be that closely observed, because nowadays we're in the age of photographs, so that's not really the case anymore. Anyway, it I never had a particular interest in the Mona Lisa painting or the story in any way. So it was only after I wrote the song that I went and I researched, a little bit about Mona Lisa and Leonardo, whatever I could find. And I found that whatever lyrics I wrote, they somehow reflected the reality of their story without me necessarily even trying to. So that song felt like it just came from another place. And it wasn't really even in any relation to what I was thinking and relating. So I don't really understand my own writing, to be honest with you. I don't know why I write the stuff I write at the time I write it. But I tend to try and be somehow obedient to the material, if that makes sense. I try to listen to what the songs want to be, and I try to serve them. I think that's the best way of describing it. I feel like they already exist somewhere else, like another dimension or something, and it's kind of pulling them in and giving them a shape and materializing these ideas. But I sometimes feel like, especially certain songs, they were already written somewhere else, and I'm just kind of pulling them through. And I think the songs that are written really fast, like the "I Leave Everything to You" that Glenn was talking about, those ideas are literally downloaded. I think that's what they feel like, when you're downloading a file into your computer. I like that's kind of, it's just a moment of kind of download, and sometimes you leave it raw the way it came, and sometimes you can adjust it a little bit. Those are actually my favorite ones, the ones that come finished.
Yeah. Glenn, how about you? Do you need distance or does that matter?
Definitely need distance. I'm on Hemingway's side here. I like I think what Burroughs is saying is what's immediately in your conscious view. It doesn't necessarily mean what's immediately in your surroundings. I'd be a big fan of Burroughs, but I wouldn't imagine that he's necessarily talking about writing about the present, but more writing about the present that's in your consciousness or in your mind. Not that I'm not putting words in William Burroughs' mouth. Far be it from me. Um, did you see Queer? Actually, it's so beautiful. No,
No.
yeah, check it. You check it out. And Daniel Craig, my God, he's amazing.
Yeah.
God, he's amazing in that film. But anyway, I'd be on the side of Hemingway in this way, in that I like life happens, and whatever filter I have, it needs to kind of just gently go in. And I think a lot of, and I'm sure you've touched on this with other songwriters. I think a lot of processing happens within the idea of like songwriting. It's like you're processing the stuff that's gone on in your life, but also you're processing and predicting the future. So if you're writing in a kind of a semi-conscious way, meaning like you're not, I want to call it frontal lobe writing, where you're not just sitting down and writing about your life, which Marquetta is very good at. Marquetta can sit down and write about her life in a way that is very immediate, and she, you can get like, you can give her a storyline, and she'll sit down and write about that story. I tend to write in a much more, like not, I, I'm kind of writing near the point, but I'm not ever making the point exactly. I'm kind of writing about the neighboring emotional aspects of that point, to kind of circle the airport a bit to get to the meaning of it. So so you end up predicting your future a lot in songs too. You end up singing about stuff that will happen, even though you're not intending to. Just you'll sing lyrics and you go, well, that doesn't feel. I don't know where that came from. And then 6 months down the line, you realize that, oh shit, that lyric I wrote 6 months ago, now I'm in it. Now I'm passing through that moment. So I think as a writer, you're pulling stuff from the future, the past, the present. You're kind of just, you're in this place where you're just collecting the big, you know, uh, flagpoles of your life, and you're just kind of speaking to them in whatever. I mean, it sounds very, very vague, and it is very vague, and there is no science to it. And as Leonard Cohen said, if I knew where the good lines came from, I'd go there more often. you just don't know. You're just in a process the whole time of being open to what is coming. And I love songs. I've written a whole bunch of them. I still don't think I'm any good at it, but I'm still feel like I'm getting better at it all the time, because you're trying to get to that. You're always trying to get to a place where you're saying something solid, you know?
Okay,
Right.
last question. Books. We have to talk books and literature. I can't do an interview with songwriters without talking about books. Um, so my habit is, and this is a point of discussion. I am not a genre person. I'm an author person. So when I finish a novel, my first thought is I want another voice in my head. My thought is never let me read something else by that same author. It's always let me read another voice. So that's why I like short stories and short story anthologies. But I'd love
Mm.
to know, obviously you're both readers. So Marquetta, we'll start with you. Are you a genre person, an author person? Who do you like to read?
Actually, most of the books I've read have been kind of bought at the body, mind, and soul section of the bookstore. I think just I kind of got on a journey probably when I was around 16, where somebody recommended. Actually, I know who it was. It was a very good friend of mine. Maria recommended a book to me called "You Can Heal Your Life." She just said, "I think you would really enjoy reading this," and I read it and loved it. And that book led me to another book, and that book led me to another book, and I got on this journey of kind of self discovery and kind of seeing what more was out there. Spirituality wise, and kind of just expanding your mind, and kind of the whole thing about like thoughts manifesting, and words manifesting into your reality, and the idea of your spirit, your emotional body, your mental body, in addition to your physical body. And there was just so much out there to kind of soak up, things that I'd never heard anyone talk about, or things that I didn't I didn't see being taught at school, and thought should have been, that I just dove right in, and it kept me going for years and years, and gave birth to a lot of ideas and ways of thinking. And then I tried to go into to fiction at a time, and I realized that I wasn't getting as much out of reading when it was fiction for some reason, that I loved watching stories, about like love stories or any, otherwise. But when it comes to reading, I just end up going back to something that is gonna open my mind to new ways of thinking and seeing the world. And yeah, so that would be my go-to type of book.
Glenn, how about you?
Um, I tend to move around a lot. I love writers and I love books, but I guess I'm always trying to move around. I mean, I just right now I've got, for the second time, Gunter Grass's The Tin Drum open. I'm also reading I Went to Russia by Liam O'Flaherty, the great Irish short story writer. Um, uh, I've got Steinbeck's oh gosh,
Perhaps
no, the one he wrote about the traveling down the coast on a boat. I'm just trying to remember it. It's basically kind of after like Sweet Thursday, and it it's basically him on a boat going down the coast. So I tend to have a lot of books open, and I like you. I love to enter a universe. I love to enter a universe of my favorite book would be Bulgakov's The Master and Margarita. Um, and I just absolutely adore that story. Obviously, the Swell season is named after the Joseph Skoretsky's wonderful book about summer holidays. But I tend to move. I tend to move around in a very varied way. Uh, I wouldn't I consider myself a very slow and deliberate reader. I don't I don't fly through books. I like to let books kind of just really sit with me um for some time, and I like to spend time with them and just spend time in that universe. Um so yeah, currently the one that's currently in my bag is I Went to Russia. by Liam O'Flaherty, which is all about visiting St. Petersburg and Moscow in 1930. So it's a very interesting time when Bolshevism is at its kind of feverish height. And it's a really fascinating. He's a fascinating writer, a great Irish writer. So again, like yourself, it's not that I want to hear a different voice. I just want to go into a different universe. And yeah, it's exciting.
So I found it to be very liberating once I realized I didn't have to finish a book. I was always the kind of person that said, no matter how much I don't like this book, I'm going to finish it, damn it. Once I stopped myself and said, you know what, I'm just going to read 50. If I don't like it, I'm not going to finish it. It opened my world up to a lot of literature that I could read otherwise. So do you, Glenn, we'll end with this. I mean, and then Marketa, do you feel like you insist on finishing a book?
I don't. It's not important to me. I feel like I go live in a book and I can live there for a while. And if it doesn't inspire me, I put it down. And sometimes I come back to it, and sometimes I don't. But I'm totally fine with that. You know, my favorite writer is John Fante he's from Colorado. He lived in LA for a long time. I've read all of his books and I finished them. You know, he's important in that way that I feel like I must read it. But no, sometimes if I'm in the airport, I'll go into the classic section. I'll just buy something. Like, I've heard about this book. I've heard everyone talk about this, and I'll just go in and I'll get a sense of the universe that it's in. And I just go, yeah, no, I'm not interested, and I'll leave it. So I don't mind, but I love passing books on. I love the gift of books. The book that impressed me the most in the last few years was probably now let me just get this. Well, it's Shuggie Bain by Douglas Stewart, a Scottish writer it's incredible story about a young gay man growing up in working class Glasgow. It's autobiographical, although he doesn't say that. It's kind of written fictionally, but it seems to be very much autobiographical. That book, and then W.G. Sebald's Austerlitz is probably my favorite in the last couple of years.
Marketa, do you need to finish a book, or are you okay with putting it down?
It depends if I like the book. Like, it bothers me if I really like it and I want to finish it, but I can't for the life of me find the time to finish it. It will kind of stay on the shelf of my mind as like an unfinished business, you know. But if it's something that I didn't connect with, that I kind of tried to read and it wasn't for me, I don't mind putting that away and not returning to it, you know. But there have been books that I've just, you know, just motherhood has kind of left me pretty tired by the time it's the evening and I can sit down with a book. So I tend to be able to get through a couple of pages and then I'm like out. That was kind of, you know, difficult. That there were books that I really wanted to finish, but it took me like a year or two just to finish one. You know, that's kind of been my reality. Right now, I'm reading the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and I've been chipping away at that for probably about a year as well. But I will finish it. I will finish that one.
And that's it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, you can find all the episodes on all major streaming platforms and also at the Songwriters on Process website. That is at songwritersonpodcast.com. Pre-2020, this was not a pod. I was transcribing all of the interviews. So you can find all of them, hundreds of them, many hundreds of them, on the Songwriters on Process website. You'll find both the transcribed interviews and the pod there. Take a deep dive, spend a day. These are great conversations with songwriters just about the writing process. Also, my book, Desolation, a Heavy Metal Memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari, is out now worldwide on Hachette Books. You can find it online in all major bookstores. Mark is a good friend. He is the guitarist in the metal band Lamb of God, and it's his memoir. Again, that is called Desolation, a Heavy Metal Memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari. I am biased, but that's a damn good book. My email, ben@songwritersonprocess.com. Send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love suggestions, questions, comments. People always email me and tell me who they want to see on the pod next. You never know. Send me an email, ben@songwritersonprocess.com. That's it for me, everyone. Have a great day.